All right, now the fun can begin. I want to point something out that I forgot to mention in respect to Maya and then size. When you open and close Maya, whenever you're working on stuff, it'll sometimes reset back to meters. So I want to show you the problem with that. If you don't remember to go back into centimeters and hit save, what'll happen inside of Unreal. So here we are back in Unreal. I'm going to go ahead and make a new folder. Now if you don't see your content browser, I'm going to go ahead and close that. You can hit Control and Spacebar to open it up in Unreal 5. And to lock it so you don't have to keep doing this. It's kind of nice to have it like this so that if you don't have a lot of screen real estate, but if you do, you can just hit Dock and Layout and it'll lock it there. Now, inside the characters here, we'll just go ahead and make another character folder to store our animations in our mesh. So I'm going to right click and go to new folder here, and I'll just name this like generic bot. And inside this generic bot folder, I'm going to right click and I'm going to go ahead and import into generic bot. Now I have this robot idle. Remember I mentioned I like a static character just so I have skeletal data. I'm going to go ahead and import both of these so you can see the difference. So this one was done in centimeters, and then this one was done in meters. So let's take a look at the meters one first. So I'm going to go ahead and hit open. And what happens with these Fbx Import settings is it's looking to know, is there any animations? We don't have any. And then are you going to be using any or referencing any skeletal mesh for any characters that already exist? We are not. This character is coming in with its own skeletal mesh, so I'm going to leave that on. And I want to import in the geometry. So pretty much the default settings are fine. So I'm going to hit import all. And let's go ahead and close this out. Now here's my robot SM skeleton. Notice when I drag this in here, and this is our one this one I was saved out in meters. So if I go to settings here and I have it set to meters and I export it from Maya, this is what you get, is you get a very tiny, so let's go ahead and make this like 50 by 50 by 50. So you can see there's this very tiny character here. Now if I go back into this generic bot folder and I, let's see, right click and I import in the one that has the C, which stands for centimeters, and I'm going to go ahead and import all. I'm fine with that. Notice even visually there's a difference in height between those two, right? And so and what's happening here is it's actually referencing this original skeletal mesh. So I might have to delete all of this and then re-bring it in, but actually let me make sure, did it by default? That's going to override it. Well, let's just drag it in so you can see. Notice here, our character is the size of the reference that we had set up before. Remember we brought this reference into Maya? Let's hit F to focus here for a minute. So you want to make sure you're exporting from Maya. You're exporting from Maya in centimeters and not meters. All right, so here's another thing. Let's say we want to delete this generic bot folder, right? Because I'm like, okay, I want to do a fresh import, and I hit delete here. Sometimes, even though you force delete, for me it did it this time. It wanted to be good, but it would actually remove it would leave everything in there, like the folder structure and everything, and not delete everything. So sometimes you have to force delete, and then you have to close Unreal and reopen it, and then it'll actually have everything gone or deleted, just sort of a point of reference for you. And that actually happened to me literally as I was preparing this demo. So I'm happy that it didn't do that again. So let's go ahead and do import again. Let's select this robot underscore SMC. I'm probably going to rename it later so it gets rid of the centimeters. I'm going to hit open. And I really should make a folder, skeletal mesh, all that. I'm going to hit import all. And now you can see that it actually imported in the skeletal mesh file, which is great. So I'm going to right click on here. And I'm going to make another folder and just call this generic bot. And let's go ahead and just drop these all in there. And make sure that we select move here. And I just have a folder called character. And let's keep this going. All right, now inside the generic bot folder, I usually create another folder, and I call this anims. And inside the anims folder, I'm going to go ahead and import in my idle. Let's start with that. And with this one, I do have animations I want to import. And the animation length is the exported time. That's the, if you remember from Maya when we went to export it, this exported time is from 0 to 30, for example, for our idle. And let's say we did one from 0 to 24 and one from 0 to 30, and let's see how it interpolates that information. Like, does it mess up? So I'm going to go ahead and import all. And another thing you can do is I can actually select this robot C static mesh and just letting it know, like reconfirming. And this can sometimes be an unnecessary state, but just reconfirming that, hey, this is the skeletal mesh that this animation is going to reference. So I'm going to hit import all, and you can see it has a idle, it has the idle animation. So let's go ahead and you could, I mean, in theory, I could just go in here and grab this walk and then not import in the mesh. Oops, no, I want this, want the skeleton, but I don't want to import the mesh itself. That's the geometry. I just want to bring in the animation data. So let me show you that too. So, here, hold on a second. Here, import animation. So if I remove the mesh, it's automatically, I guess it already knows that I just want to bring in the animation data. Let's see how that does. And I'm going to use that skeletal mesh as the animation. And it's still robot underscore walk. So let's hit import all. And now when I close it, notice it only has the walk animation here. So what do we do? So if we go back to generic robot and we say, okay, well, here is our robot. So let's double click that so we can take a look at it. And sometimes I like to dock them up here just so I could switch between them. And what's nice about this is we're sort of looking at our mesh viewer here, right? So here's our preview scene. It talks about like, well, is there a default animation? You know, like the reference pose, use specific animation. And then we can say, okay, well, let's see. Does the idle work? Yeah, there's our idle animation. So we could test that out. Let's see that walk. So that's looking pretty good. So we got our robot walk here. So it's a good way to test our animation before we set it up using blueprints and stuff. And we are going to create a blueprint, a character blueprint for this character. But you can see here, now we have our character with the referenced idle animation. And just for the sake of clarity, oftentimes you might be like, well, why didn't we just start from the first, like from the get-go, where we just only brought in the animation data? Sometimes you want to bring in the mesh data as well as a skeleton as a safety or fallback if your initial file gets corrupt or breaks. But by and large, you can, and if you're working at a studio, they're really only going to ask you to do what we did, where we only exported out the walk data. And if you're working with other people on a team, you're probably just going to export out like a walk, an idle, a jump, and all that stuff. So that's it for now in respect to bringing in our character. Actually, let me show you one last thing. So just to kind of show you in the scene that it is working. So if we bring this character in and we look at the details here, you can see a lot of the same animation stuff that we have going on here, or inside that detail panel I showed you before with the skeletal mesh, and there's animation data. We haven't created an animation class, but like, so there's like use animation blueprint, you can use animation asset, and there's another way of testing it, like we can grab that idle. And now when we play our game, you can test it out this way as well. See, here's our guy, and he's super huge. And I think the reason, sorry, it's been a little bit between these tutorials. I think the reason we did that is because we wanted a monster character to go through these doors. So we're going a little bit bigger than what's there. Anyway, so that's another way of testing it in your scene. And then if you need to, you can right click on this, or you can select this and then, let's see. Oops, not the details panel. Come on, let's bring this detail panel down. Just a little bit. There we go. In our actual outliner, which represents everything in our scene, we can actually right-click on it here, and we have additional things where we can browse to the asset, all that good stuff. Actually, let me move this off to the side here. And yeah, you know what? That's it for this tutorial. What we'll do in the next one is we'll dive a little bit deeper in creating a blueprint and taking a look at how we can drive our character.